You are live with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here with fellow tech friends AJ Vickery and John Biehler, broadcasting from our homes. We have a really awesome show today. Later on in the program, we'll be talking with Dr. Richard Titus. He's a doctor over in Hamilton, Ontario. And we'll be talking all about virtual care. If you have had to go to the doctor in the past few weeks, many of you have probably done it virtually through video chat. Well, we're going to talk to him about all the aspects of that and what his thoughts are about that being around when the virus dies down, and if that's going to change the way we visit our practitioners.
Funny thing for me there, Mike. I had to go to the vet this week, and they offered me virtual care for my dog.
How does that work? I mean, I like it. I love it, but I can see all kinds of wrong things happening there.
I know. Guess who had to check his temperature in his butt?
Leanne?
The mouse? What? Yeah.
How do you check the dog's temperature?
I know.
What? You happen to have a dog butt thermometer lying?
I'm going to say yes.
And my next question, I know my two dogs, there's no way they would sit still for that.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's, yeah. But, this is the world we live in now.
Yeah. But did you find that convenient?
I mean, I don't think so. Personally, I would prefer to just take the dog there, drop him off, go get a coffee, come back, pick him up, and pay the $700 bill. Personally.
The thermometer was the cheapest part of that whole thing. You know that?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. And so did they, I guess they still charge you the same amount, right?
Yeah. I mean, I roughly, yes.
Oh, I get it roughly.
Yeah.
And did you get a diagnosis?
Yeah.
He's fine.
Ultimately I did have to take a pee sample down there as well. So I had to, the story just gets too long and awkward to tell the whole thing.
How'd you get a pee sample from a dog?
Well, okay, this is actually not a tech trick, but I'll let you know. It's brilliant. You use a ladle.
A ladle?
Yeah, so what you do is the dog's having its pee, you just kind of sneak a little soup ladle down there. And it's brilliant. Dog doesn't know. You don't have to be sitting down there with a bottle or nothing. It's just it's brilliant.
The visual that gives me right now is not comforting.
I know one thing for sure. When you guys ever come to my house, you are not going to have soup or check your temperature.
Oh, you totally derailed this, AJ. Okay. Besides the virtual care for humans, we'll also be talking with Alex Fraser. He is a consultant for the hospitality and restaurant industry, all about the commissions that the food delivery app folks are charging and if that is sustainable. Quickly, in the news, did you guys see that story about the Amazon vice president resigning?
Yes. I actually know Tim.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So what happened there?
Well, basically, he was just tired of the corporation's inactivity activity as far as dealing with the people within the company that were complaining about the working environments and the whistleblowers that were fired because they were raising concerns. And he just said, that enough of this, I'm out of here, kind of thing. And it was a really interesting story because I heard about it. I didn't realize it was Tim. And I haven't seen Tim for years, but we used to travel in the same circles, and I always found him to be a very interesting guy and a very quiet guy. So this seems like a lot for him to say, and to leave a fairly prominent position in Amazon over this as well.
Yeah, that is very, brave of him to come out.
Mm-hmm.
In that aspect. I can only imagine the pressure that some of these Amazon workers are under right now. I mean, can you just imagine the amount of or volume of business going through with those folks at the moment?
Well, and the scary thing is that a number of the warehouses have infections, and so they've had to close some of them or temporarily close parts of them. And I can only imagine the stress that would put on the people that are there. I mean, a lot of people in the warehouses, they're entry-level staff, and they may have just started as part of, the current situation. They picked up some part-time work or full-time work. And so now they're thrust into this place that's probably chaotic at the best of times. I can only imagine what it's like right now.
Well, we'll be following up on that story as we get more details. We are going to have to take a break right now. When we come back, if you have ordered any food through Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes or any of these other food delivery apps, you've got to listen to this next segment. You're listening to Get Connected here on the Chorus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with Mike Agerbo and John Biehler. We want to explore something right now that's affecting a lot of the restaurant industry. During the COVID-19 pandemic here, obviously, we're not hitting the restaurants. We are ordering from them. And a lot of them are using these food delivery apps, be it Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes. Today, we wanted to dive into that a little more to help the listeners understand how that all operates, where the money is going, and is this working for the restaurants in general? We've got a great guest on the line. His name is Alex Fraser. He is the Vice President of Western Operations at the 15 Group. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Great to be here, Mike and John. Thanks for having me.
I find this fascinating. I know a few friends that have restaurants, and I would say, a lot of them, they've had their own delivery drivers since the beginning of the time, and they're continuing to stay with that because they say they can't afford these delivery food apps. Maybe you can tell our listeners, the basics of how they work, how they make money, and how they're helping the restaurants.
Yeah. So, with third-party delivery apps, you see three components to what they do. They charge a setup fee to get going. Two, they then take a percentage of the sale that the restaurant is taking on that. And that is anywhere from 20 to 30% that they take, that the restaurant loses on each order. And thirdly, they've done an incredible job at setting this business or these businesses up. That's great for the market, but not necessarily great for the restaurant, because often, that 20 to 30% that they're charging on each order is really eating up the profit that a restaurant would typically take on that order. So it's been an interesting time over the last 6 and 7 weeks from the pandemic, because I feel like it's a bit of a reckoning period where this has now shone light on how these third-party apps are set up and what kind of impact it has on the restaurant.
I can see the pros and the cons. Obviously, it's a central place. It's kind of like a marketing advertising tool for these restaurants that are participating, because so many people are using, for example, like a Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats, and it's so easy to go in there and find exactly the type of restaurant you want. It's so convenient. Right. But to your point, the money that goes out to these delivery apps, it's a lot. And my restaurant friends, their margins on their food, they're not killing it. You know what I mean? It's not like double-digit margins in many cases. It's just like single digits. So I fundamentally do not understand how they could make money using these delivery apps. Like, it's kind of almost a necessary evil, because if they're not on it, they're not going to get the business they want, because all their competitors are on it. But if you're giving out 20 to 30% commission, like, how much profit does that leave?
Yeah, it doesn't leave much. And it's such a great point, Mike, because what we see is they've done an incredible job at intensifying the need for third-party apps in the delivery market. And what they've done is they've positioned it really as, if you don't have a third-party app, then you're not really getting yourself out into the market. And let's break this down for a second. You've got very quick serve, small takeout restaurants using third-party apps. And if you have tremendous volume, meaning that your concept is set up for that, then third-party apps maybe makes better sense, because you now have so much volume that your pricing structure can allow for that to happen and make sense. If you're a mid-sized restaurant that's more of a sit-down restaurant, you've got a few things to consider. Now, with the pressure of feeling like you need to have this out into the market and be available for the market, you're now adapting your model to have delivery drivers come into an environment that typically wasn't set up for takeout. So imagine you're dining with a friend and you're having a great experience, and there is a constant supply of delivery app people coming in to pick up their takeout, and now it's disrupting the service. So it's a challenge in that regard. And also those types of restaurants, the business model isn't set up well to do that, because they're not that smaller quick serve model that is making their money on the frequency of ordering.
I think you brought up an interesting point, Alex. The notion of sitting in a restaurant, having a nice meal with somebody, and then watching a driver come in and pick up a bunch of food. But that happened to me a while ago, and I actually watched the driver and what they were doing, and they were actually filling their trunk with these delivery bags. And it was like, wow, that's a real big turnoff. I don't want, my food to be sitting in the back of a trunk with somebody else's food. Who knows when it's actually going to get to me? And the apps do show you the timings, but it's just not as good as getting a dedicated driver from that restaurant, bringing it right to you straight.
Yeah, it's a great point, John. I mean, you've got that disconnect of brand as well, right? So when you have your delivery driver that you've employed for a number of years, there's a connection there. There's someone that's representing your brand in a way that's not only best for you, but also best for them. So we see that model having a different impact, if you will, and also this may lead to, in the future, models really building out the footprint of the restaurant to have a really dedicated, great pickup spot. And you see so many of these in New York, where you'll find one part of the bar which is segregated enough that you're not impacting the actual great experience that you've created with atmosphere. And now you've worked all day, the kids are at home, you're going to pick something up, you're going to go in there, get in and get out and not be disruptive. And the other part of that is I don't want to go in and disrupt a great evening by coming in and getting takeout. So it may lead to some different footprints in the future where the restaurant takeout, where we're promoting people coming in to pick up their food and leaving is built out a little bit more in a commerce way and a little bit more efficient to the overall experience.
So we're looking again at the overall profitability for a lot of these restaurants. We're talking about the 20 to 30% commission. I've seen some jurisdictions and cities trying to enact bylaws on limiting the amount of commissions. I believe San Francisco was one of these. Yeah,
San Francisco and Seattle for sure. And that's a great point, because I'm really interested in finding out if this might be a reckoning for governments to and municipalities to cap what the delivery fees are in the future. And you mentioned San Francisco and Seattle have started that program, and I think that might be something that's very interesting and potentially great for the industry. And it also is going to shed light on other opportunities for delivery. And you mentioned, the in-house delivery driver, and the challenges around that can typically be insurance. But we've also seen things that have come out from this. We have a client, Pigeon restaurant in Gastown, and Brandon Grasuti, a great, smart young man that has started from two. And it's in the beta stage right now. But essentially, it's a delivery service that he set up that has no transaction fees, no percentage of gross taken. And it's a little bit more control on the restaurant side to how that's working. So from2.ca is something that I think we'll be launching later this month. So, there is some silver lining in all of this potentially for the future, and a potential cap, and also some other opportunities for delivery services and how they work.
I also am concerned with a lot of these restaurants, especially during these times. They are so dependent on these delivery services. Vancouver people might not have seen this story, but in Toronto, there have been outages with Uber Eats, for example, that have hurt a lot of the restaurants during those outages. I think there was one example of a bakery that was losing like $6,000 a day in business because Uber Eats went down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. When you're relying on your business model to be something that is not in your control, then there's that challenge and potential pitfall of being so dependent on it. But I think we're also in a little different of a landscape here with the density that you see in most urban cities in the U.S. You see a good combination of both stop in and takeout. Where in Canada, I think you've got less of that. So it's not, that Toronto example might not be resonant of what happens in Vancouver or Montreal as an example.
How sustainable do you think these delivery services are over the long haul? The restaurants are making money. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, the 20 or 30% commission that they're getting, but they are spending dump trucks full of money advertising their service. So, are these delivery services like Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes, are they profitable?
Yeah, I'm not sure what their profit model looks like. I know that Foodora has announced that they will be closing their operations in Canada, and that goes back to the model that they have with delivery drivers being on bicycles. If you don't have that urban density and opportunity of market, then that kind of model is going to suffer. But I'm very interested to see if there is a moratorium put on pricing structure in the future. And what the model will look like. And if it is that 15%, which has been the benchmarks for San Francisco and Seattle, I'm wondering if they're going to be able to survive, or again, it's going to lead for new opportunities for local businesses to now start delivery services that bring money back into the local economies as opposed to going to somewhere outside of the local demographic.
For our listeners who are concerned, for their local restaurants, I don't think any of us want to see our local restaurant go under because, they couldn't afford to keep open. What are some tips for them to help their local restaurants?
Yeah, great question. We've seen, and I should mention, we've seen a great response from local communities trying to support restaurants. And there's a few things that they can do. One, any opportunity to purchase gift certificates at this time that might be used once we go through the phasing stage is certainly something that infuses cash into their model. Secondly, if there's an availability of going to pick up your order at the restaurant, then you're not paying that third-party fees. That entire sale goes right to the restaurant itself. And I think staying connected with restaurants. I mean, I know that many models now have been modified, and there's new opportunities because a restaurant that you may not get into for a month might have a new program that's a little bit more market friendly. So try and stay local and try and support as much as you can with ordering direct from the restaurant.
We're talking with Alex Fraser. He is a restaurant consultant that helps restaurants become more profitable. He's the VP of Western Operations over at the 15 Group. Give us your web address there quickly.
Yeah, it's www.the15group.com and www.the15group.com.
Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Great to connect with you.
When we come back from the break, more tech to talk. Back after this. You are back with Mike Agerbo and John Biehler. Want to talk telehealth now, and this is something I think a lot of people are doing now, especially because most of us can't get to the doctor because of the lockdown or the self-isolation that many of us are adhering to. We want to kind of explore that a little more and just see what it's all about and if it's working. On the line, we've got a great guest. His name is Dr. Richard Titus. He is a practice doctor in Hamilton. He is also an associate clinical professor in the Department of Family Medicine at McMaster University and the CEO of a telehealth company called WeCare. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. What a great time to see the doctor virtually. So I was telling John that we've gone from 6% adoption, docs seeing patients virtually, to 70% over a course of 2 to 3 weeks.
Sorry, say the first number again.
So what we did was the Canadian Medical Association, which I sit on the board, we did a survey, And prior to this COVID-19, at that time, we had 6% of doctors providing virtual service. So over this COVID-19 pandemic, we've gone from 6% to 70% in a matter of weeks.
That is an amazing number. You're a doctor. How do you find it? Obviously, you've gone for a huge change here, going from seeing people in person to over video. Can you give the same type of care through a video chat?
Mike, we can give the same type of care and sometimes better care. Because, for example, let's say, you've got your dad at home or mom at home. She's got high blood pressure. In the old days, the only way you could see the doctor is by taking your mom, getting her into the car, driving to their doctor's office, getting her up the steps, into the waiting room. And after half an hour, they get the exam room. And then by the time your mom's in the examining room, what do you think she wants to do?
Not be there.
Yeah, not be there. She wants to go home. Yeah. And what do you think her blood pressure is like?
It's way up.
Exactly. So this is so much better.
But, so you brought up an interesting thing about blood pressure. Like, how do you deal with that, though, if you have to take blood pressure or blood or, take temperatures and things like that? Obviously, that has to be done in person.
So great point, Mike. So one of the issues is with blood pressure. Blood pressure should not be done in the doctor's office. Blood pressure should be done at home. And I tell my patients, look, what you need to do is take 2 blood pressure readings every morning. Forget about the first reading, document the second. So when I see you, I'm going to ask, what was your blood pressure reading the last 30 days? And they give me an average, and I treat them based upon that. Not what the blood pressure's in the office. Come into my office, kids are screaming, there's gum on the chairs. So by the time you get into my office, you're not happy.
No, probably not. What do you think's going to happen after the pandemic kind of eases down? We don't know how long that's going to be. Do you think there's going to be a fundamental shift in how people access their family doctors now? Do you think we're going to see that number that you mentioned in the beginning, on average, just be kind of the new normal as it goes up?
Well, there's been an explosion of virtual medicine. So the genie is out of the bottle, and we won't be able to put the genie back in. So digital medicine is here to stay. And it's important that physician adopt it. And because the patients, every time I ask a patient or I see a patient virtually over this pandemic, the one question they always ask is, can I continue to do this after the pandemic?
And I guess you would say a resounding yes. So as a doctor, are you kind of allocating certain hours to be virtual?
Yeah. So what I do is right now during the pandemic, there's some aspects of patient care you have to see the patient. So when it's prenatal care, so children coming in for vaccinations, baby exams, people coming from the hospital for follow-up, well, you have to physically be there. Or I haven't figured out how to take blood virtually yet. But when I do, I'll let you know. But so there's visits that you have to come in. But I would think 70 to 80% of the visits I can do virtually. So what I do is a lot of times patients want to see me virtually. And I say, look, hey, I can see you in an hour, 2 hours, and I'll call you back and let's set something up. And patients love it. Great access, great care.
So do you think that would speed up how quickly we could see doctors? Because right now, my doctor, I have to make an appointment days in advance, maybe sometimes even a week in advance.
Yeah, so I think with virtual medicine, what happens is patients, if you can't see your doctor right away, so by the time you see your doctor in a month, you've saved up all these issues, and the appointment takes like 20, 30 minutes. But if you've got a urinary tract infection and I have to see the doctor for the urinary tract infection, and I want to see the doctor within today, because I don't want to have all this pain tonight and tomorrow, then these are really focused visits. and they're efficient, and I deal with your issue, and you leave happy. So I find them certainly more efficient and more focused.
So, but for some things, when I've gone into the doctor, he's got to kind of poke and prod me. Does it hurt here? Does it hurt there? Is that something that could be done virtually?
A lot of times we do. I say, Mike, can you press over here? And they go, up here? And I said, no, a little bit lower. So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can direct the patient to do.
Do you think that some of these different tech devices that we talk about all the time on our show, like Fitbits and Apple Watches and other things that can take some kind of diagnostic information, is that useful for telemedicine?
I love all that. I love, actually, if you could see, I have a Fitbit and an Apple Watch on Fitbit on my left, Apple Watch on my right. I love this digital technology because it helps me so much. I also like the blood sugar, so you can get these now monitoring your blood sugar. There's these apps, and the great thing about the apps is the physician can also have your value. So I have my patients that do the blood sugar on their app, and I see the results. So if the results go a little bit crazy, I can give them a call and say, hey, what have you been doing? What's happening? So digital medicine apps is certainly the way of the future. But not only that, it's not only good for the physician, but it really empowers the patient. Like I've got this blood sugar monitoring app, and all of a sudden they said, well, geez, I didn't know I shouldn't have had that 2 pieces of toast. If I have 1 piece of toast, my blood sugar goes up to 7. But if I have 2 pieces of toast, it goes up to 9. So it's that immediate feedback. So I love this digital technology.
Do you find any reluctance from certain people to do this?
I do. Some people say, Doc, I think this is super awesome, wonderful, but I don't want to know. I don't want to be guilty. So when I eat my chocolate almonds, I want to eat 10. I don't want to eat 5, because if I look at my glucose monitoring app, I'm going to eat 5.
When it comes to telehealth, is it just doctors now? Are there other aspects, like can you talk to a nurse or your pharmacy? Is that a growing area?
Yeah, so it's exploding. So you can talk to your physician, you can talk to specialists, you can talk to mental health workers. One of the things that we part of the guidelines that we came out with national virtual medicine guidelines. They came out February 11th, like really fortuitous, like 4 weeks before the pandemic.
No kidding.
And one of the pillars is that it's got to be, we recommend it's within the circle of care. Like, it's so great if you can go see your family doctor that has your history, that knows what medications work, and has your laboratory values. So you get your virtual care or medicine from him or her. And also, we've got specialists that are part of that particular team. And it's so awesome.
Is this limit certain parts of the population that can access this? Like, I'm thinking of, like seniors, for example, that might not be as good on technology. Are we kind of leaving them behind?
Yeah. So seniors, it's the way you sort of approach it. So they said, no, I don't do virtual medicine. I said, okay. Do you Skype with your granddaughter in Australia? Yes, I Skype with my granddaughter in Australia. Well, I call it medical Skype. Now you can Skype with your doctor. And then she says, yeah, well, that's easy. I can do it with my granddaughter in Australia. I guess I could do it with you down the street. Yes. So it's how you present it.
It's all about the marketing message.
Absolutely.
What about security? Should we be concerned about that? Because, when you look at hackers, a lot of times it's them breaking into health-related companies.
So the long and the short answer is no. Okay, during the pandemic, we don't care what media you use. You can use your iPhone, you can use Skype, you can use FaceTime. We don't care. But having said that, after the pandemic, there's going to be definite restrictions, and you're going to have a secure virtual medicine platform.
Tell us a little bit about your company, WeCareMD.ca.
So WeCareMD we sort of directed our care towards retirement homes and nursing homes. So our concern was, how do you get these patients seen in a timely manner? So when you have a senior and the senior has let's say a bladder infection, if you don't deal with it immediately, they get sick very quickly. So what we did was we had platforms put into retirement home, but it has digital tools. So digital tools, we can, with a stethoscope and otoscope, so I can do a complete examination without the patient leaving the retirement home. So this is before the pandemic, but since the pandemic, this was a great way to address any needs of the patients in retirement home. They didn't have to go out. They weren't exposed, and I wasn't exposed going in. So I'm really proud to say that at WeCareMD, we take care of about 10 retirement homes, and we have had no COVID-19 pandemic or COVID-19 positive individuals. Knock on wood. I'm knocking on my head right now. But you got to provide the care, right? And it's got to be timely care. And digital medicine allows that. So even, like, for example, at Sunday night, someone comes, they've got a cough, they're bringing up phlegm, they're starting pneumonia. So let's deal with it Sunday night.
So they could basically contact you, and within like an hour, they could be talking with you and getting diagnosed.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking with a very interesting guest right now. His name is Dr. Richard Titus. He's the CEO of a care company called WeCareMD.ca that provides care for seniors in retirement homes, and just talking about virtual health in general. What if you had some parting words for the people that are reluctant to try virtual care, what would you tell them?
Okay, so virtual care is here to stay, and we've only started it. Okay, so there's so exciting new developments that are happening today. For example, you could go to Best Buy US. Okay, you go to Best Buy US, and you can buy this home kit. It's called TytoCare. This home kit that has a screen. It's got a stethoscope. It's got an otoscope. So you could see your doctor, and the doctor directs you how to examine yourself. You don't have to leave your house. Now, that's where medicine is going, and we're trying to catch up in Canada. So, so this is really an exciting time for us, and we have to embrace it.
Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. And stay safe.
I will. That was Dr. Richard Titus. He is a doctor in Hamilton, Ontario, and an associate clinical professor in the Department of Family Medicine at McMaster University. When we come back, more tech to talk here on Get Connected. Stay tuned. You're back with Get Connected. It's Tech of the Week time. John, what have we got?
Well, this week there was a couple of really interesting announcements on the Raspberry Pi sector. First of all, we've got RetroPie, which is the big emulator software that we've talked about quite a lot for basically emulating all your favorite old arcade games and game console games. They've now officially released support for the Pi 4, which is arguably the fastest version of the Raspberry Pi out there now. So now you can emulate a lot of much newer games and consoles on that, which is really exciting. And they also announced, Raspberry Pi Foundation announced a new camera for the Raspberry Pi. And this is a much improved quality of camera system. It actually supports interchangeable lenses, which is really interesting. So I haven't tried it myself yet because it was just announced, but it looks really interesting that they've really jacked up the specs on the camera itself. And I can see a lot of interesting applications. One of the photos that they showed with the announcement was it actually being interfaced with a Canon lens, a giant Canon lens. So being able to put this big sensor on your existing camera lens stuff is going to be pretty cool, I think. And people probably find some pretty interesting uses for it.
Well, I saw that announcement about the camera. It's fascinating because, the Raspberry Pi, for the listeners that don't know what it is, it's like a little hobby computer. You basically buy the little board, and these things are tiny. By the time you put the case on, it's smaller than a deck of cards, literally. And you can do so many different types of things. You talked about the version 4 of it. That's the most powerful one. Yet you can actually turn that into a computer. Some people are actually running versions of Windows 10 on it. Much better for running things like Linux, which is kind of a version, like a graphical type version of like Mac OS and Windows. But the camera, like how would that work? I mean, you're basically attaching a camera lens to a board.
Yeah, well, essentially, it turns the Raspberry Pi into the camera body, if you will, and then because the nice thing is the way they've integrated the camera attachments to the boards that uses a little ribbon cable, so you can actually position it a couple different ways. And a lot of the cases, at least with the previous version of the camera, actually had support built into it to attach the old camera, which was very low quality, kind of like a webcam quality. This seems like a much more advanced, much higher megapixel camera option. So I could see some pretty interesting cases that'll basically just interface with an existing lens system, probably.
Well, that's all the time we have left. Don't forget to visit our website, getconnectedmedia.com. Go to our homepage there and the newsletter tab. If you subscribe to our newsletter, you were entered to win a new Belkin wireless charging stand, special edition in white. This thing's cool for any of the new phones that can do the wireless charging. Again, visit the homepage, getconnectedmedia.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. Don't forget to listen to our sister show, The App Show, tomorrow morning here on Global News Radio, CKNW 980. We will be talking about a lot of cool new apps and also the Taiwan digital minister and how they're handling the coronavirus over there. We'll see you again next time.